In the style of, we are going to dive into the style of Netsky's liquid DnB vibe, and specifically the track Moving With You from Netsky and Jenna G from well over a decade ago. But it really sets that liquid tone of rolling breaks, that rumbling bass line, and just a positive feel and vibe. So that is what we're going to make in today's video. Now, the key fundamental things that make a liquid DnB track like this go are that rolling classic break sound, big uplifting pads and leads, a deep rumbling bass line, and something for the ear to pick up in terms of a vocal. As always, for this project, I've made a template which you can listen through the whole thing in the link below, and you can download it from there as well. So beginning with the drum, we do have in here the amen break. What we do is we use it as an extra accent layer later on. So the pattern's kind of a stripped down amen. If we take it, it's just this. It just gives it that vibe. Having that little pause at the end lets the actual break kind of flow and move on. The other classic break that's in here is the think. It's the think topper in this case. Not pitched up to the degrees where you've got that tiny little vocal chop. We went with that instead. And then to flesh it all out, we've got lots of other layers in here. I've just cut a kick from a standard loop in Logic called Around Midnight, and that's just this. That's just adding into that overall vibe. You hear that? That's giving us some low end. I've doubled that up with a punch kick, which is the drum synth. So this is just one that's made in drum synth and tuned to how I want. Pitched up a little bit to give it a little bit more top end and kick through. Here we go. And then we've got some snare layers in here on the classic 2 and 4. One is cut from the 2-step flip beat, which is again a Logic break. I've just cut this little sample out here. And then is my sharp snare. If you download the project, you'll be able to obviously have it, or if you have Soulful DnB Volume 1 sample pack, it's in there as well. So that gives us this foundation. Then with the think break in. Then with the amen break in, and remember this is only in the main section. It just needed a little bit more to fill it out. So here at the start, we've got a ride and crash, and then it goes into just a ride. So let's extend the loop a little bit. And hopefully for you, that ride is just kind of sitting on top of the whole break, just kind of floating along. And then just to fill out that little bit, if you're in headphones, up on the upper right, we've got just some shakers. Just filling out that space. And that gives us all of our drums together to build the break. Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They let me get my music out to all of the major distributors, and they do that at a price an independent artist can easily afford. If you're ready to get your music or beats out there and want to release an unlimited amount of music each year, check the link in the description below for a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution with DistroKid. There's a couple of little sections where I've done things like a little quick build in with the drums, like here. Drop it into the break, and we've got some breakdown parts here. We've got different shaker and tambourine patterns, and you'll see why we've got those as we go. Now the track opens up with a stripped down version of the break. Remember how I said we're not using the amen? Here it is without the amen and without the shakers and the tam. And this just gets us started and riding up into the track. And then you'll see approximately every 4 bars, And they just give us those key moments. And you'll find this when you listen to like the older Liquid vibes from Netsky. You're going to have like that significant moment rolling over into the next section. It's a really common technique in drum and bass. And towards the end of the track, we've got the full break, really flexing out, and then the stripped down one as we start to fade out here. Now, in terms of the mix, you'll notice that we're already at like 50 plus channels. It's because the arm and break here is split up into all its individual channels, and there's some individual EQing going on some of them to take out some low end that we don't want on other bits like that. So that's all split apart. In the end, we only use a little bit of the arm and break, like these first few samples, making a lot of these redundant. But as it's a template, I want you to have the ability to use the full break if you so desire, because the idea is you take this and you flesh it out and do whatever you want with it. So that's all in there. And everything else is really just sort of defining each sound out, like using just the distortion here on the compressor to bring the rides up. The shaker's got a really extreme EQ, leaving just the absolute most high end in. Taking out some harshness in the snare samples. Nothing major going on. We turn our automation lanes on. We can see here that is how that is being controlled in terms of the filter. Parts like this, where it's ramping back up. And the intro as well. And on my sharp snare here, we're controlling the send to the reverb. So we don't want that to be blaringly loud right here at the start when there's basically no drums, but we do want it to filter up as the drum break comes in. And in this middle section here, we've taken that away as well. Now that we've got the drums together, let's have a look at what we do with the chords, how we built them up, the notes and key that we're using, and more importantly, the sounds and how they develop in the structure of the song. Now for chord structure, I wanted to keep it relatively like positive, but still keep it within the like DnB kind of area. So we're leading off of F, which kind of makes sense, but we're not in F minor for once. And chord structure, really simple, named it for you. F, E, M, F, G. In Logic, if you ever want to know what notes come together and what chord they make, if you highlight all of the notes and look over here on the left, it'll tell you 4 notes selected, F. Now you might see that F and think this isn't an F, it's an F6. So highlight them all, 5 notes selected, F6. As well, we've got these grayed out notes on the bottom. I was experimenting with having the bass within the chords as well, or what notes I was going to use for the bass notes. So I've just left them in there as I've copied it over. So if you want to, you can just go T and M for the mute tool and just enable those in key places. If you want to have them in there, they're ready for you to use. Our foundation is this. And the second 4 bars. So it's a very simple melody following along those 3 tones. Now, as the track progresses, we add more to this. So as we come into that second set, we've got a copy here with higher bells. So as you can imagine, we're up an octave. So let's listen to how that adds to it. And then we have splashy keys that we don't get until after the 8-bar mark. So let's just listen how that progression works. And with the splashy keys, the 3rd chord is actually a little, it's basically a melody, like it's like flammed going up across the length of that chord. So that gives us this effect. And then when we hit that, it climaxes and goes back into the original. So it builds up, and then drops back down to the original. And as well, we switch to the final chord before that kind of final build up happens. And we have the flam basically happening on that final chord as well. It's becomes a melody back into the chords. And once that's cycled round once, so into our second 16, the lead is literally just a saw wave with a filter that wobbles over the top of it. That's all I've done. Now let's have a look at how all that push-pull works with our drum. So we've got our drums, our chord, and our melody all together now. We need the foundation that all of that sits on, and that's going to be our bass line. Now, we had a look in the chord section, and we already figured out the notes that we were going to use. And from there, we're going to apply ourselves a nice foundation, a bass line to roll along the bottom that everything else can then sit on top of. The two bass elements are relatively simple. We've already seen that in our chord section here, we figured out what the bass line was going to be in relation to the chords. And when making it, it's very simply become a simple saw bass line. And this is all that's really heard in these kind of tunes, with some manipulation using automation just to open up those key moments using a filter. The techniques are really simple. It was created entirely in Alchemy, and I'll link a video below for you that goes over exactly the process that I used here. There's nothing else. It's quite a simple tone to make. One thing that is kind of key on the EQ here, there's nothing below 60 Hertz because we have a separate sub operating directly below it, and that's also made in Alchemy. And as you can see here, there's nothing sort of above the 60 Hertz with the sub. This is just that pure sine wave weight. And by separating the two, it means we can easily manipulate one and adjust it in any way that we see fit without affecting that subline. And then as we introduce our drum breaks and our instrumentation all back together, now got the fundamentals of the track all put together. Now in this style of track, you'll hear like soulful samples and old school kind of vibes with bits of old vocal in. It's really the style of DnB that I love to make. And to emulate that, we've used some samples from Logic, and I've also got a bit of a vocal recording and a cappella to make a nice little harmony that goes along and a little vocal pickup in the ear, and to sort of set the tone at the start of the track. And we can see the structure here of the introduction, the main body, and the outro. You has this big soulful vocal over pretty much the entire track by Jenna G. But this being a template, we don't have that, but we have utilized some of that soulful sample vibe using some other sounds from Logic to bring that same effect in, and there is some vocal elements that I've decided to introduce as well. Really importantly, in the start of the song, we use this little angel effect vocal here. And it's setting the tonality across that intro that we're about to move into another section. And here we go down to our core keys, and we utilize these pitched around vocals here. It's Ellis Island vocal chop. And there's processing in terms of pitch correction, EQ, and compression. This means we can utilize this same tone again later in the breakdown section here. Where we've got the lead sitting across the top. If you were to put your own vocal in here, it should fit in really quite nicely. I used another vocal sample here as a sweep and introduction into the track. Improv vocal. And lastly, we have a custom recorded snippet here from another a cappella. Just to set a vocal tone. I've also created this separate vocal chop, as in using the very small individual chops and automation to help them move. This is just taking a filter and slowly bringing it down. And lastly, where it says hook idea, we've just introduced an idea that could be used as an overall hook for the track.
Think of you, think of you. You were always there for me, even in the storm. I wanna say thank you for all that you have done. 'Cause if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been
Now we've just utilised this small part of the vocal here, but actually it's not limited. If you want to, there is a whole load more here that you can work with. I really hope today's video has been helpful for you. If it has, there are many more, like the two linked right here next to me. And don't forget, you can grab that template, and if you're watching in the first couple of weeks, it will be 50% off, as it always is for the subscribers and people who keep coming back to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in future videos. Take care.